We expected a good one out of one of the bigger matchups across the country in non-conference play. Oklahoma visiting Tennessee. It went down to the wire despite the Volunteers' dominance on defense through much of the game, and Oklahoma pulled it out in overtime. We bring in Mike Loveall of Last Word on Sports to help us break it down. Mike, we always appreciate the time, especially in the aftermath of this kind of loss. So before we break down the football, can you give us some kind of idea of what this means to Vol Nation that's desperately seeking this kind of win on the national stage to kind of get back into play?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, great to have me. It was pretty emotional for Vol Nation after the loss last night. The hardest part was that Tennessee was up. They had it. We felt like we had the game in control up until the fourth quarter. The mantra of, hey, we're back to a national power program was there. Everybody was ready to take it and run with it, and then they lost the game in the fourth quarter. So it was pretty crushing. Not that we lost, because a lot of people had Tennessee losing to Oklahoma as one of their 3 or 4 Tennessee losses this year, but the manner in which we lost it was really the crushing part for the Vol fans.
So can you kind of characterize for us through 3.5 quarters what this Tennessee defense was able to do to Oklahoma, which came in with one of the better backs in the nation in Samaje Perine, and also an offense that spreads you out and has Sterling Shepard on the outside, who ultimately got the game-winning touchdown pass?
Yeah, the story of the first 3.5 quarters was definitely the Tennessee defense. The defense matches up pretty well schematically against an air raid offense. We were able to stop the run. The Oklahoma offensive line is pretty young, pretty inexperienced. Orlando Brown had several penalties. So our defensive line and the linebackers were able to stop the Oklahoma running attack pretty effectively. Baker Mayfield was able to get out of the pressure that was brought, but in that offense, you don't have to be that's not an offense designed to be pinpoint accurate. So our coverage in the secondary was good enough to prevent any of the Oklahoma big plays. The talent level for the Tennessee defense is there. It's on par with the other programs that we need to be on par with, and that showed last night. A lot of people were worried about the Tennessee defense after the Bowling Green State game, where we gave up 400-plus passing yards to Bowling Green's quarterback Johnson, but they played exceptionally well last night against the run and particularly against the pass. So that's how Tennessee's defense did it. I think they kept Mayfield from getting into rhythm, and they dominated the line of scrimmage from a run-stopping perspective. They did not get the number of sacks they thought they would get, but from a run-stopping perspective, they were able to control the line of scrimmage for the most part.
You know, nobody should blow a 2-score lead, especially about 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, but it happens multiple times every Saturday. Almost nobody blows a 3-score lead, and part of the game that I locked in on was the beginning of the third quarter. Jalen Hurd ripped off a 30-yard run. Josh Smith went for 21 yards. Ethan Wolf was integral in springing both of those ball carriers. Tennessee seemed to do this time and time again, where they moved the ball between the 20s. They got bogged down in the red zone or just prior to the red zone, and it kind of kept them from widening what was a 17-3 lead most of the second half.
Yeah, the offense sputtered almost the entire game. Even the 17 points early in the game in the first half came on short field position drives. The first one was an interception that was, I think, inside the Oklahoma 30 that resulted in just a field goal after having it third and goal from the 1-yard line. So the fans were a little bit disappointed about that. And then the other two came off punt returns from defense holding the Oklahoma offense deep in their own territory. So the offense really sputtered all night. It just seemed like they couldn't get in rhythm, particularly at the quarterback position with Joshua Dobbs.
Yeah, and I saw this a number of times on Facebook and Twitter, where Butch Jones, I think mercilessly and unfairly, took some criticism for his field goal decision, considering first points of the game. You can't propel that toward the end of a football game, do the addition on the score, and consider that a lost game because of a decision made that early in the contest at that point. So can you kind of size up what the offense looked like and what you would have rather seen out of the offense? Was it anything schematically or just a better execution?
Well, I think I think better execution. It wasn't nothing schematically because Tennessee's going to play the same offense every game. I did think the play calling was conservative and hesitant at times, and it just looked like Joshua Dobbs could not get into rhythm, particularly with his second level passing. If you notice late in the game, he skipped one out to the flat. It's a fairly easy throw. It's a 15-yard throw to an open receiver, and he just skipped it like a shortstop throwing to first base. So he was clearly out of rhythm, and his decision-making as far as when to leave the pocket, when not to leave the pocket, also seemed just to be a half-second slower than it normally is. So I don't think it was schematics. I think the play calling was a little bit hesitant and conservative based on – I think they were play calling based on a 14-point lead instead of assuming it was 0-0. And then just the offense couldn't get in rhythm. I think it was because Joshua Dobbs just could not get comfortable for some reason.
Hey, Mike, you still with me? Unfortunately, we had a bit of a disconnection from one of us there. Oklahoma-Tennesse, Vols dominated the game, especially on defense, 17-3 with about 7 minutes left. Oklahoma scores twice late to tie it up. The second one, a Baker Mayfield touchdown run to tie it, send it into overtime, and we're waiting for Mike to get back. Hey, Mike, you back with us?
Hey, Mark. Yes, I am. Sorry about that.
Oh, I don't know what the connection was, but it may have been a little bit both of us there. I was just leading us into the Kurt Magid was lost at one point in the game, one of the more impactful defenders in the last couple of years around the country, tackles for loss and sacks. Do we know anything about his status?
We haven't heard anything today. He looked like he was trying to get back on the sideline or trying to get back in the game last night. Came out after going into the locker room with medical attention, got back on the bike, tried to loosen up. The injury report last night said it was his hip. So haven't heard anything today on that. It did not look too serious as it looked like he was trying to lobby his way back onto the field last night, but he never made it. But that is certainly a key component to Tennessee's offense. Cam Sutton also had to go out for a drive last night, and Jalen Reeves may have had to go out. That turned out to be an equipment issue, not an injury issue.
So no one can be underestimated. Just ask Auburn. So Western Carolina next weekend, but you would think that that's a manageable game. It's probably a good thing considering the crushing nature of this loss that you get Western Carolina and then have to take that big trip to Florida. So just your thoughts about regrouping before one of the bigger games of the season, every season for Tennessee.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest differences between this team, Team 119, and the years we've had in the past is the program's continuing to mature. I think this will be a test how Tennessee comes out this Saturday against Western Carolina. A lot of people will not have that on their radar, but to see if Tennessee comes out, to see if they're focused, and to see if they're sharp in their execution, it's going to be telling on how mature or how much this team has matured in the last 2 or 3 years. Of course, this is Butch Jones' third season. It's going to be I'm really going to be looking at how focused and how well they execute against Western Carolina, because I think that's going to tell us a lot about the mental strength and the psychology of Team 119. Then we go to Florida. I've been saying all offseason that Florida is our biggest game of the year. Again, going back to that team psychology, Tennessee really needs to end that 10-year drought. Florida's a team in transition. They struggled with East Carolina yesterday. They got a new coaching staff, so you got a new offensive scheme and new defensive coaches. This is the year Tennessee has an opportunity to end that 10-year drought this year. Additionally, if Tennessee wants to finish second in the SEC East, Florida is one of those teams they have to leap over in the standings. We think we're ahead of Vanderbilt, Kentucky last year, and so when you talk about getting to number 2 slot in the SEC East, you're really looking at South Carolina, Missouri, and Florida. Those are the 3 teams you got to get over. We think we've solved the South Carolina game 2 years in a row. So then you're really looking at Florida and Missouri. So beating Florida will do a lot of things for us psychologically emotionally for the team, and to get us where we want to be, which is second in the SEC East. So that's going to be a huge game. It's going to be our first real road game, and it's going to be a tremendous test for this program in all aspects.
Okay, Mike, I'm guessing that there are some Vol fans out there that aren't necessarily going to concede that Georgia game, especially since it's in Knoxville, but you're not necessarily looking for an SEC Eastern Division championship this season.
I think it's possible if everything goes the way it goes. If Tennessee catches a couple breaks, which they did not last night, but if they catch a couple breaks as the season goes on, it's possible. I do not expect it. I think it's more likely that Tennessee wins the SEC East than it is that Tennessee finishes fourth in the SEC East. But I think Tennessee is pretty solid for second in the SEC East or third in the SEC East.
Okay, Mike. Well, this guy's got him slated for Atlanta.
When Tennessee plays Florida.
I'm sorry, Mike. You kind of cut out there, but this guy here has him slated for Atlanta, and of course, despite the crushing nature of the loss against Oklahoma, that does nothing to play into the SEC Eastern Division standings. So, Mike Loveall joining us from Last Word on Sports. Kind of looks like you've got one other thing to drop on us, Mike.
No, I was just going to say, I think as crushing as the loss against Oklahoma was, I think it really shows that Tennessee is kind of where they want to be. It was an overtime game. I think Oklahoma looks really good. They had an off year last year, but they had some injuries. Baker Mayfield's a good quarterback. Look what he did last week. That defense is a really good defense. So while Vol fans are very upset that we lost, and rightly they should be, because we kind of let that game slip away, it does show that we're at the point where we need to be in year 3 of the Butch Jones experience, where we're competing at that national level. So I think a couple of breaks, we could get to Atlanta. I think we're solid for number 2. The atmosphere was back at Neyland Stadium last night. It was a nationally televised game. The stadium looked great. The fans were great. So we're getting there. It's a long process. But I think next year is the year that we really compete for the SEC East title.
That loss is going to look really good if this guy sitting right here is right and Oklahoma upsets TCU and Baylor and gets to the college football playoff. But we'll see if that plays out.
Certainly a possibility with that Oklahoma defense. Absolutely.
All right, Mike Loveall from Last Word on Sports, always breaking down the Vols and the SEC for us. Thanks, Mike.
Great. Thanks, Mark, for having me.